All right, YouTube. All right, YouTube. Once again, it's Kennard Vernon Stewart here for the podcast. Talking Auburn football. Go ahead and subscribe to Vernon Speak Sports Auburn. Like the video. Also, feel free to leave your comments concerning Auburn football, especially in the wake of some of the events that have happened over the past few days that could lead to some decision making on the administration's part. Like the video, comment, and subscribe to Vernon Speak Sports Auburn. And as always, it's great to be an Auburn Tiger, War Eagle. The Auburn Athletics Department continue to experience success, especially in the basketball realm. The Auburn basketball team riding a very surmountable winning streak, a almost 20-point victory over Alabama. Alabama basketball, arguably one of the best non-ranked teams in the country. If they could just kind of piece together what their objective is. Seems like Coach Oates is still trying to figure things out, trying to figure out the best parts. He's got a talented team, but they can't seem to piece it together. I mean, they beat Gonzaga. They beat a lot of ranked teams, but they can't seem to get over the hump as it relates to Alabama basketball. But Auburn beat that team by almost 20 points. Being close to surrendering the lead early in the second half, Auburn pulls away with that victory. Did excellent at the free throw line. That was actually one of the main differences, the key differences of the game, as Auburn defeated Alabama for the sweep of the season. Also, there are several other sports with Auburn that have experienced some success here as of late. But we talk about the Bryan Harsin, the surfacing Bryan Harsin drama. So let's get to where this all began. Bryan Harsin onboards about a year ago, a little over a year ago, and replacing Gus Malzahn. Gus Malzahn, who enjoyed some pretty good recruiting classes, had 2 appearances in the SEC championship game, won one in 2013, had a national championship appearance in 2013, which I was actually talking to one of my colleagues today. Auburn won a national championship in 2010 with Gus Malzahn as the offensive coordinator at that time. Auburn appears again in the 2013 national championship, and the significant portion of that appearance and the possibility is the fact that there are players on that team from 2013 that could have had multiple national championships, which would have been unprecedented for Auburn. It would have opened up a lot of opportunities as far as recruiting. I think Auburn would be in a different state of being had they been able to hold on to win that national championship game. So here we are now. Auburn goes to the 2017 SEC championship, loses to Georgia. Gus Malzahn gets the huge raise because of beating Alabama and Georgia, who were number 1 teams in the country at the time that he won the games, but went on a 2-game losing streak, losing to Georgia and then subsequently to UCF, who pled that they should have been the national champions because of that. Auburn in 2018 had a pretty good year, or had the potential to have a good year, loses to LSU, then goes on a downward skid to where defensively Auburn didn't do too well, finished that season 8-5, beats Purdue in the Music City Bowl, gave some promise. Gus Malzahn says that he's going to be calling plays, which gives a little hope going into the 2019 season. 2019 season rolls around. You got a quarterback battle, which started with Malik Willis, but Malik Willis transitions out. Now the quarterback battle is between incoming freshman Bo Nix and Joey Gatewood. Bo Nix actually wins the job out, gets the historic win over Oregon. Bo Nix, the first true freshman quarterback since we know when. And Auburn stumbles to a 9-4 season in 2019, which could have been a little bit more successful had some things fallen into place. Then you go to 2020, COVID year. You thought Gus Malzahn might have had a chance to hold on to the job. He beats Mississippi State, does the goofy dance after the game. A few hours later, we find out that Gus Malzahn has been terminated as Auburn's head coach. On boards a name that no one knew about, no one even speculated, no one even figured into the equation, Bryan Harsin. So who is Bryan Harsin? Bryan Harsin is or was the head coach of Boise State. Led Boise State to a 69-19 stretch as the head coach there. Won some big games. I think notably won the game on the road against Florida State after being down by a considerable amount of points. And now he is the head coach of the Auburn Tigers. Contrary to popular belief, this wasn't the popular choice. Bryan Harsin has always been a question. Okay, he's not an SEC guy. He's not a big name, which leads me to my first point. Auburn fan base is infatuated with the big name. If you think about it, they want the big name coordinator. They want the big name head coach. They want the big name. But if you think about it, how many big names have fallen by the wayside? You think about Dan Mullen at Mississippi State, who went to Florida. Epic fail. You think about Will Muschamp, who was a big name. An epic fail. Winds up being an analyst. McElwain. All of these coaches who have had some type of Nick Saban tie, they feel like, if you've coached under Nick Saban, then all of a sudden you have this Midas touch as a coach. But if you think about the record up until recently, this is the first year Nick Saban has actually lost to his former coaches. Lost to Jimbo Fisher against Texas A&M. I think that score was 41-38 or something like that. And then subsequently losing to Georgia, his right-hand man, defensive coordinator Kirby Smart, in the national championship. So now you're starting to kind of tread a little bit of different water as it relates to former Nick Saban head coach's ability to claim victory over their former and epically successful boss. I think Auburn has to get away from the big name because the big name had to start somewhere. Nick Saban was not always a big name. He worked his way into being a big name. Kirby Smart had to work his way into being a big name. Jimbo Fisher had to work his way into being the big name. I think Auburn fans want the big name and want the immediate success. And that's where some of this anxiety is coming. Because now you have a situation where Auburn is the number 18th ranked team in the country as far as recruiting goes. Did not sign a single player on National Signing Day. Now, just to give some kind of consolation to that, National Signing Day in February is not what it was in the past. National Signing Day is typically for those kids that want to have this epic flip, that wants to have the table with the hats and all this other stuff, and they want to commit to their school. They want to have that isolated attention on what is now an obsolete National Signing Day. Auburn coming into this, having a few players that were targeted as possible flip. They were going to have to flip the guys. And then you talk about Caden Story, who was the defensive lineman out of Lynette, who had committed to Auburn, but his main recruiter, Nick Eason, leaves Auburn, goes to Clemson, who, let's talk about Nick Eason for a second. Nick Eason is a graduate of Clemson. It makes sense for him to leave Auburn to go to Clemson. I would suspect that that would be a pretty formidable job for him, considering that he went to the school. He has no tie to Auburn. He has no serious ties to Bryan Harsin. And it's an opportunity for him from a collegiate standpoint to go somewhere where he's comfortable and to go somewhere where he genuinely wants to be. I think makes sense. I think this has nothing to do with the credibility of Bryan Harsin. Then you talk about other outgoing coaches. You have Derek Mason, zero ties to Auburn or Bryan Harsin. I think Derek Mason did a pretty statistically good job. Outside of the Mississippi State game, I think he did a pretty good job. Averaging under, like 22 points a game, gave Auburn an opportunity defensively to win pretty much every game played. Derek Mason decides to take the trip to Oklahoma State and take that job. Mike Bobo, who y'all didn't want anyway. When Mike Bobo was hired, even Georgia fans were like, what the heck are y'all doing? Mike Bobo departs, and now he's an analyst or something at Georgia now, at his alma mater. Austin Davis, an offensive coordinator that was hired by Auburn from the Seattle Seahawks with zero college experience. I will put Bryan Harsin on the spot for this. I think he had a plan for this. But I think let's just assume that he was going to give Austin Davis the reins of this job. I think it was a questionable decision. No recruiting experience. No offensive coordinator experience. And really a coach that is not very tenured. He wasn't too far removed from playing football himself. I think that was the most questionable hire for Bryan Harsin. Austin Davis decides that he's like, nah, I personal reasons, I can't do it. So he doesn't onboard at Auburn after 43 days of having the title of offensive coordinator. Now, post-National Signing Day, Bryan Harsin failed to sign a single player on National Signing Day. I'm not shocked. I did not, of all the targets that were possible, I felt like it was a roll of the dice. As a matter of fact, some of the folks that thought that they would get Trey Citizen didn't even get him. We thought it was down to Florida, LSU, and Auburn. He winds up going to Miami. Caden Story, we knew what he was going to do. And some of the others, we knew what they were going to do. So, no, it was a questionable performance National Signing Day based on what we typically see on that particular day. But what folks don't realize is that a lot of the work was done during the early signing period. Auburn signed a lot of guys, a lot of quality guys, a lot of guys that can make some immediate impact. The only thing that Auburn did not accomplish in the early signing period was securing at least 2 to 3 offensive linemen. That's an immediate need, but you think about the retention efforts of Bryan Harsin, you look at the list, you see a lot of those guys are coming back, offensive lineman wise. So you got a big room, offensive lineman wise. Then to caveat all of that, you have Javaris Johnson. Now, this one kind of stung a little bit because I was a Javaris Johnson fan. I wanted to see how Javaris Johnson would make some impact coming into the 2022 season. But Javaris Johnson hits the transfer portal. But you also have, with him departing, you have like 12 wide receivers, including Shedrick Jackson and Javion Capers and guys like those coming back to add some depth to the wide receiver room, in addition to some pretty good gains in the Tony Fair from, this particular recruiting class. And, you have all of that going on. But to get to the meat of this discussion, Bryan Harsin, let's just assume that all of this clamoring and noise that is going on subsides and kind of dissipates. What will season 2 look like for Bryan Harsin? Now, many of you have heard the rumors of the alleged inappropriate behavior, possibly by Bryan Harsin as it relates to some of the folks that report to him. I'm not here for that. I'm not here for the rumors. I'm not here for any of that because, truth or not, if that happened, then that will all surface. And I think the Auburn fan base is in a position now to where there's a lot of anxiety. It's like they don't want the dumpster fire, but they're putting everything out in the universe to create the dumpster fire. Do you know what a dumpster fire will look like if Bryan Harsin is no longer the head coach at Auburn, at least at this moment? It's going to look pretty bad. Who is out there? Name me. Okay, by show of hands. Auburn fans, show of hands. Who's going to replace Bryan Harsin if all of this bullshit comes to pass? He's no longer the head coach. Then now what you got? All you got, Auburn fans, most of you, I would say a half of a third of you will have, and I could name some names, but I'm not because I just don't want to do that. And you know who you are that comment even on my channel. What you got? All you have, if all of this bullshit dissipates and Bryan Harsin takes his show to somewhere else, is you're going to have another reason to complain. You guys have been complaining since Gus Malzahn. Gus Malzahn wasn't good enough. You ran it, basically ran him out of town. You continually create controversy and division among the fan base when all of these young men want to do is play football. Play football. I'm gonna tell you what you're mad about. I know you. I've seen you. I've been doing this for a few years now. Here's what you're mad about. You're mad that your fragile ego was broken by Bryan Harsin, and I'm gonna tell you how. Bryan Harsin came in. He talked a good talk, talked the tough talk, talked that he was gonna do certain things. It was starting to look like it was going to happen. You're starting to war eagle. You're starting to poke your chest out and feel like you're among the elite of the SEC. And guess what happened? Auburn goes up 28-3 against Mississippi State. Mississippi State comes back to win, and it just sucked the wind out of you. You were kind of sort of okay with that. But then when South Carolina comes around, okay, well, we lost to South Mississippi State. That was a pretty tough loss. Now, here's what you didn't do, though. Some of you commenters, you weren't around when Auburn beat Arkansas, a ranked team. You weren't on the road. You weren't around when Arkansas beat Ole Miss. Your comments weren't there, and I called this particular person out already. I'm just not going to do it again tonight. Hit out for 2 weeks. Auburn beat ranked teams consecutively. Not a peep from any of these people. But then Auburn loses to Texas A&M. Bo Nix hobbling around, and then you got TJ Finley having to finish up that game. 20-3, Auburn loses. Then surrendering the game against Mississippi State. Then surrendering the game against South Carolina, and then ultimately, I think the dagger in your small ego's heart was the 4 overtime loss to a team that went to the national championship. It's not like the 2012 season when Auburn was getting blowed out every week. 63-21 to Texas A&M. Getting slaughtered by LSU, Georgia, and all those other teams. You could almost count on your hand the degree of loss, point-wise, for Auburn this year. But I'm not going to do this tonight. I'm just going to let you guys know. Let's say Bryan Harsin emerges from this ridiculous state of being that is being imposed on him, at least from a logistical standpoint. Now, I ain't got nothing to do with the side stuff, with the allegedlys that's going on with Bryan Harsin. But when it comes to what I know, the facts of the football, what was done on the field, this guy does not deserve to be on the chopping block. 6-7 first year, having a chance against pretty much every team except for Georgia. I think this is bullshit. Once again, it's Kennard Vernon Stewart here for the podcast, talking Auburn football. Auburn faces Georgia tomorrow on the road, I think. The number 1 team is on the spot again. Bruce Pearl, with all that intensity, he's better keep it going. Bruce Pearl is earning his keep so far. I want to give a shout out to all the Auburn fans on both ends of the spectrum. Definitely got a lot of love for you all. I get the passion. I understand. But come on, guys. Let's not do this. Let's give this thing a chance. Like the video, comment, and subscribe to Vernon Speaks Sports Auburn. And as always, it's great to be at Auburn Tiger, War Eagle.